Number 1. Patricia Ann Adkins. Adkins was last seen departing her place of work at the Honda of America automotive plant in Marysville, Ohio. She clocked out a few seconds after midnight on June 29, 2001. At the end of the second shift. She had worked for the plant for nearly 10 years and had become a supervisor at the assembly line, and she was anticipating a promotion when she disappeared. The plant closed down that night for a week because of the 4th of July. She has never been heard from again. Adkins had been having an affair with a married co-worker at the time of her disappearance. They dated periodically for years. His name has not been released to the public. She told her loved ones and acquaintances about the relationship and said the man planned to leave his wife to be with her. She gave him approximately $90,000 over several years, depleting her savings accounts and borrowing against her 401k retirement fund. Shortly before she went missing, she told her boyfriend she would need to start repaying the 401k loan soon. Just before her disappearance, Adkins told her family and friends she was going on a vacation to Canada with her boyfriend. She put her pets in a kennel, and asked her sister to look after her 7-year-old daughter while she was gone. She said her boyfriend had told her they were going to a cabin in a remote area without phone service, so she wouldn't be able to call her family. He also told her not to pack anything, because they would buy whatever she needed once they arrived there. Adkins asked a female friend to drive her to work the night she disappeared so she could leave with her boyfriend to start their vacation. She told her friend that her boyfriend had to give a male co-worker a ride home, and had told her to hide in the bed of his pickup truck until he dropped the other man off. In spite of her boyfriend's instructions not to take anything, Adkins had packed a small teal-colored duffel bag. She told her friend it contained something she'd bought at Victoria's Secret, and that the item was blue. The bag and its contents have never been found. Adkins was scheduled to see her hairdresser after her vacation was over. She never kept the appointment. She was reported missing by her sister on July 8. After she failed to come home and pick up her daughter, she left her car behind in her garage and all her belongings undisturbed inside her house. When her boyfriend was questioned, he said he and Adkins had no plans to go on vacation together. He had never had an affair with her and he only knew her slightly. He and his friend said they left the plant together on June 29, drove 30 miles in the direction of their hometown of Canton, Ohio, stopped at a Burger King restaurant, waited 45 minutes in the drive-through line, got their food and went home. The boyfriend's wife backed up their story, saying her husband arrived home at 2:30 a.m., the usual time, and that she didn't know anything about an affair. The Burger King manager, however, said they were never busy in the early hours of the morning and no one would have had to wait 45 minutes in the drive-thru to get their food. Adkins's boyfriend gave the police permission to search his home and they found a new truck bed cover in his garage. The boyfriend had bought it on June 26 and he said he used it to cover some fishing gear in his truck bed. He put it on the truck on the morning of June 29 and removed it on July 8. He normally didn't drive the truck much, but he drove it to work the night Adkins disappeared. Police took the cover for analysis and found cat hairs on it and a small spot of blood. Adkins's veterinarian determined the hair came from her cats, but authorities haven't been able to test the blood for DNA because the spot is too small. The boyfriend took a polygraph test about the case and failed it. Shortly after Adkins disappeared, he quit his job at the Honda plant and never returned to work there. Adkins was declared legally dead in 2006. There's been no activity on her financial accounts since she went missing. Her loved ones stated she was happy with her life and her job, and maintained a good working relationship with her ex-husband. Both authorities and her family believe she was the victim of homicide. Her case remains unsolved. Number 2. Mary Lynn Anderson, found deceased. Mary Lynn Anderson, age 23, was last seen in Gillette, Wyoming sometime in 1982. Mary Lynn left her Minnesota family home as a young adult, and was known to have lived in California, Oregon, and Iowa. While in Iowa, she met and married Herb Shondell, and they had a baby girl. Their marriage was troubled, and Mary Lynn suffered from epilepsy. Therefore, Mary Lynn turned parental rights over to her parents, who raised the little girl. Although Mary Lynn traveled frequently, she had always kept in contact with her family. Mary and her husband divorced in Hennepin County, MN in October 1981. Mary was last seen by family friends, who saw and spoke with her in Gillette, Wyoming, sometime in 1982. She appeared to be doing well, Since her contact with family was sporadic, she wasn't reported missing until a couple years later, at which time it wasn't taken seriously due to her lifestyle. Her family later learned that Mary had never been entered in the national databases, although information about her time in Gillette, Wyoming, a town of 20,000 people, is scarce. I think more could be obtained. Once, while searching for information about her case, I found a Craigslist ad from her family, a plea for any information. The ad referred to letters that had been sent by Mary, which implies that a return address would be available. In addition, the news articles do not say whether or not the family friend who saw Mary in Gillette saw where she was living. An address could be a huge lead toward locating people who knew her around the time she was last seen, the owner of the property, neighbors, etc. Based on the newspaper articles, Mary's family seemed to suspect that Herb Shontel may have known something about Mary's fate. He always maintained that she just disappeared, and he did not know where she was, even as he succumbed to emphysema in 2004. Considering that Herb and Mary were divorced in Minnesota in 1981, I wonder if there is any indication that Herb was ever in Gillette, Wyoming with Mary. Mary's daughter had a glimmer of hope, a while back, when a convenience store clerk near her home told her that a disoriented woman had come into the store, looking for someone. She could not remember the person's name, but knew the person lived in the area. She appeared to have amnesia. Mary's family is now considering the possibility that an epileptic seizure could have caused a head trauma that resulted in amnesia. I also wonder if her SSN has been run to see when the last activity was. I've searched the unclaimed property database in Wyoming, hoping to find something with an address, but found nothing. My gut tells me that Mary wouldn't have been living alone in Gillette. Someone who lived in Gillette, Wyoming in 1982 knew Mary and could shed some light on what was going on with her around the time she went missing. Did she say she was leaving, or where she was going? Was she happy or depressed? Did she have a job, a boyfriend? When in 1982 did they last see her? I do hope someone will come forward. Mary's family needs answers. Number 3. Vick Lamberton. Vick Lamberton, age 24, disappeared from Worcester, Massachusetts in February 1974. Vick was separated from her husband, and had indicated that she was interested in reconciling. They planned a nice dinner, but Vick never showed up, and was never seen or heard from again. Attention quickly turned to Dr. Roger Barker, one of her college professors at Assumption College. Although he was married, her family suspected she was involved in a romantic relationship with him. Friends of Vick's also stated that they were aware of the affair, and that she had planned on marrying him. When authorities went to the college to question Barker, they learned that he had been in Vail, CO on a ski trip at the time Vick went missing. It was later discovered that Vick had told her estranged husband that she was going to Maine with a girlfriend, and would meet him for dinner when she returned. The girlfriend was questioned, and said she had not heard from Vick in some time, and they had not made any plans to go anywhere. The theory was that Vick had actually gone to Colorado to be with Barker. Further investigation showed that Barker had only planned to stay in Vail for the weekend, but had been hospitalized with pneumonia, and ended up staying there for 2 weeks. When Vick's family was finally able to talk to Barker, he stated that he hardly knew Vick. Although her belongings were stored in his garage, he staunchly denied that any relationship existed. While many believe she may have landed in harm's way as a result of the extramarital affair, some, including her former husband, believe she is still alive. He told reporters that Vick had commented about wanting to go somewhere where nobody knew who she was, and that she'd consider dyeing her skin to appear African American. He said that she often told people she was from Colorado, and may have been ashamed of her Kansas wheat farm upbringing. Sometime after her disappearance, a neighbor of the Kansas family farm received an odd phone call from someone trying to reach Vick's family, who had moved to Texas by that time. They also asked for Mr. Lamberton's, Vick's estranged husband, phone number, and said that Vick had gone to Europe. A check with Interpol did not turn up any record of Vick traveling to Europe. However, there was another ray of hope when Mr. Lamberton received an acceptance letter to New York University, addressed to Vick. Whether or not she actually enrolled has not been verified. Her social security number has not been used since 1974. A few things jump out at me that are missing from this investigation. If Barker was hospitalized in Vail with pneumonia, and Vick were there, surely she would have spent time at the hospital, and would have been seen there by nurses. It's unlikely that Vick drove from Worcester, MA to Vail, CO alone, which would lead one to believe that she flew there, in which case there would be a record of her as a passenger. It doesn't seem too difficult to determine if she ever was in Colorado. That would be a good start, at least. Then it could be updated to reflect that she went missing from Vail, and not from Worcester. It's clear across the country. It makes a big difference. Number 4. Karen Zendrisky. Karen Lynn Zendrisky, age 16, went missing from Bordentown Township, New Jersey, on October 23, 1979. She was last seen at a local bowling alley in the evening hours. She reportedly went to a water control plant with 2 or 3 men in their 20s. But it is not known if she went willingly or against her will. The area was frequently used as a party spot back then. Tips have come forward in the years since her disappearance, directing law enforcement to a sludge pit in the vicinity of the water plant. A search was done over several days, thanks to the wonderful people at J. Fletcher Creamer and Son, who volunteered their time and equipment to isolate and empty specific areas of interest in the sludge pits. Investigators stated that due to the lack of oxygen needed for decomposition, it was likely that her remains could be found intact, along with items such as zippers and buttons. The search turned up shotgun shells, plastic wrappers, and assorted litter. Investigators said the items were identifiable and well preserved, and they were optimistic about finding her remains equally well preserved. The 310 areas of the pit that were searched did not yield a body, and no further searching has been done. I still think she's there. I still think she can be found. I think she needs to be found. According to ABC News, investigators have a good idea of who was responsible for her disappearance, and stated they intend to prosecute these individuals if sufficient evidence can be found. Newspaper articles indicated that investigators are still seeking information on her disappearance, which initially frustrated me, because they've already talked to the people who were there at the water plant that night. They've been told that she was killed in the wooded area and then dumped into the sludge pit, and they admit they know who was likely involved. It seems as though they haven't completely searched the sludge pit, so I felt as though their plea for more tips wouldn't really be taken seriously. The only people who could tell investigators exactly where in the pit to find her are the same people investigators have already talked to. To their credit, however, they are a small town and apparently each area they search costs approximately $250,000. I do understand that Bordentown probably doesn't have the resources, without taking away from other crimes that are equally in need of their attention. Due to the hazardous nature of dealing with the sludge, I'd guess it isn't something that random volunteers can assist with. That's unfortunate, as I'm sure there'd be hundreds of willing searchers. There's got to be some way that this search can continue so that Karen can be brought home. Any self-employed hazmat vacuum truck operators out there that might be willing to volunteer their services so we can bring this lovely girl home? Number 5. Linda Grimm. Linda Rose Grimm, age 25, went missing from Paris, California on March 31, 1986. She had left her residence to purchase a pack of cigarettes, and never returned. Linda's mother heard from her periodically over the next 18 months. She said she was living on a farm in Wichita, Kansas, was doing well and getting her life back together. Linda's mother stated that Linda sounded fearful, and would not disclose exactly where she was. The last call from Linda was in October 1987. Her whereabouts at that time are unknown. Linda's family suspects that Linda may have traveled with a truck driver by the name of Robert Masters, and may have even gone by the alias Linda Masters. It is also believed that Linda had friends in Huntington Beach, California, and that she was with them at some point after her disappearance. Linda's car, a yellow Ford Pinto, was found in a supermarket parking lot on Beach Boulevard in Huntington Beach in April 1989. Linda was married at the time of her disappearance. This is another case that just doesn't seem all that difficult to make progress on. I mean, how many Robert Masters with commercial driver's licenses could there have been in 1986? And if she is believed to have traveled to Kansas with him, it could be narrowed down to ones who had ties to Wichita, Kansas. Have they spoken to Robert Masters to see when he last saw her? Or is this another she's free to disappear as she pleases cases in spite of her sounding fearful, and her car being found 3 years later? I also find it strange that her car was found 3 years later, not terribly far from her home. It obviously hadn't been sitting there for 3 years, so somebody had to be driving it. Hopefully, it was her. Given that she is believed to have friends in Huntington Beach, it still wouldn't make sense for her to abandon it in a supermarket parking lot. but it could at least establish that she was alive and well up until April of 1989, and that she'd more than likely be found in California as opposed to Kansas. I'd hope that there were surveillance cameras nearby that could determine whether she parked the car there, and if not, who did. I get the impression that Linda's family struggled with trying to get attention directed at Linda's disappearance. The only newspaper item I could find was an ad that was taken out in the Orange County Register by Linda's mother. No unidentifieds are jumping out at me, either in California or Kansas. There are only a total of 6 female unidentifieds listed on NAMUS for Kansas, which either means they have amazing medical examiners, or that there are many remains that aren't listed. I hope Linda finds her way home soon. Number 6. Niki Britton. Niki Diane Britton, age 15, went missing from Albany, Oregon on July 16, 1969. She is believed to have run away, and has a history of temporarily running away in the past. Niki was living with her grandparents in 1969. Her mother and stepfather had just married and were living in Pennsylvania. 2 months after her disappearance, she called friends of the family, thinking her grandparents would be at their home. Her grandparents were not there, but she told the friends that she was working in New York and that she was doing well. Long after Niki's disappearance, a note signed Niki surfaced at her grandparents' home. The writer of the note said not to worry about her, that she had been to a lot of places, and was living with some people in a big old house. It said that she might come home someday, but right now, she had to do what's best for her. Niki's mother is skeptical about Niki having written the note. It is not believed to have been mailed, so Niki would have had to drop it off at her grandparents' home. Niki's mother said the letter was disjointed and didn't sound like Niki. She suspects that her mother, Niki's grandmother, wrote the letter to herself, in order to make herself feel better. Niki has not been seen or heard from since 1969, and there has been no activity on her social security number. In a perfect world, it would be possible to check phone records from September 1969 to see where that call came from. If the records were still available, it wouldn't be too difficult, as there were no unlisted numbers at that time. I see a few possible scenarios involving the phone call. 1. Niki did call the family friends from New York. 2. Niki did call the family friends and said she was in New York, when she was elsewhere. 3. Someone else called the family friends pretending to be Niki. 4. The phone call never happened at all. There may be a logical reason for Niki to call the family friends instead of calling her grandparents directly, but it could also enable someone who wasn't Niki to call with less chance of a difference in voice being noticed. If Niki didn't make the call herself, then I think whoever did make the call may have also written the note. Niki did state in the phone call, according to the family friends, that she was working, which tells me she would have needed some sort of social security number, but since there's been no activity on hers, it would suggest she was using someone else's, if she really was working in New York. This is why I think a lot could be gained by researching the phone records. It would confirm whether she was really in New York, and where in New York. It doesn't make sense to me that her grandmother would write a letter from Niki to herself in an attempt to make herself feel better, as I'm sure that every time she saw it, she would remember writing it. I can, however, see her grandmother possibly writing the letter for Niki's mother to find after she passed away. If they have an actual handwriting sample from Niki, I think they should have it examined through a professional handwriting analysis. Niki's grandparents and her father are all deceased now, but her mother is still searching for her. Niki would be almost 60 years old now, and may have children and grandchildren of her own. She could be anywhere. She had been in a juvenile corrections facility in 1966 and 1967, prior to running away, so it's reasonable to think she may have some sort of criminal record as an adult. I really hope someday the call from New York can be confirmed and examined in more detail, as well as the note that could indicate she was back in Oregon at some unknown time. These two things would make a huge difference in determining likely places to look for her. Number 7. Ethel Adler. Ethel Louise Adler, age 47, went missing from Staten Island, New York on October 24, 1978. Ethel left her Newark, New Jersey home at approximately 5:30 a.m., arriving at her job at the Staten Island Development Center, formerly known as Willowbrook School, at approximately 6 a.m. Just after 6 a.m., 2 employees of the center contacted authorities when they reported hearing screams from the parking lot. Police responded, and located Ethel's locked car, parked behind Building 47, along with a pocketbook, a half set of false teeth, 3 black coat buttons, and 1 earring scattered around the car. Ethel's keys were later located in the woods. About 75 feet from the car, police conducted a search using helicopters, dogs, and several ground crews. All the buildings at the center were searched, as well as the wooded areas surrounding the center. Security staff assigned to both entrances stated that no vehicles had left the grounds during that time. The search did produce a pair of panties, but it was not known whether they belonged to Ethel. I think, if they still have them, it might be possible to extract DNA and do a comparison that could lead to a specific area to search for her remains. But if they were hers, where were the rest of her clothes? Another employee of the Staten Island Development Center, Shin Lee, had gone missing earlier in 1978, and was later found deceased in a shallow grave on the center grounds. Over the years, there has been much speculation that Andre Rand was involved in Ethel's disappearance, as well as the murder of Shin Lee. Andre Rand worked at the center as well, and is now believed to have been involved in the abductions of several children on Staten Island. Beginning in 1972, Ethel Adler and Shin Lee are the only adults that have been considered victims of Rand, and many have argued that Rand was a pedophile and would not have attempted such an act against an adult. Another theory was presented the day of Ethel's disappearance, as another employee of the center claimed she had seen a specific patient, whom she feared, in the parking lot shortly before 6 a.m., and as a result, she had been frightened and waited in her car for some time. Another employee, however, claimed that this patient had been in bed until 6:50 a.m. All the reports I have read on this case state that nobody saw anyone near Ethel because it was still dark, and they only heard a woman yelling, "I'm not going with you, and you'll hurt me," followed by a scream. There is, however, a sketch in her file, and I think it does resemble Andre Rand. Andre Rand is serving life in prison following convictions in the cases of Holly Ann Hughes and Jennifer Schweiger. A group called Friends of Jennifer still searches the grounds of the former school for other Rand victims. If anyone is interested, there are copies of reports and newspaper articles on Namus, hiding in the documents section.